Thank you guys for joining us here on day 2 at I/O here in the YouTube Distribute space. And we're so excited for our final session here with Adora, who's the co-founder of Homejoy. And before we get into what Homejoy is about, your story, and talking about your journey, we just want to talk about what exactly to expect in this talk. And basically, we're going to talk about how do you get your product out there once you've designed and developed it? How do you get your first initial customers, and how do you expand on that distribution? And really, I couldn't think of a better example than Adora, what you've done with Homejoy. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Homejoy and what it is about as a product?
Sure. So Homejoy is a platform that connects people with home service providers, and we started with professional house cleaners. So in 60 seconds, you just go to homejoy.com, you tell us a little bit about your place, a date and time for us to show up, and we send someone who's background checked, we've interviewed them in person, tested they know how to clean in person, as well as they're insured and bonded. And they'll show up at the day and time you want them to show up. And it's very quick. It's meant to be quick and convenient and very simple to use. That's
awesome. And it seems like your target demographic are people who can't seem to keep their rooms clean, like myself and my housemates. And it seems like you've had incredible success expanding from San Francisco. And where else have you gone? You guys moved international recently, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're in over 30 markets now. If you think of just the top X number of cities in the US, we're most likely there. So, our top markets are San Francisco, New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, and so on and so forth. And internationally, we are in London, and we just recently launched Berlin as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So take me through, how long has Homejoy been around now?
So Homejoy has been around for just under 2 years. We started in July of 2012, and basically that's the month where my brother and my co-founder, Aaron, he approached me with a problem he had, which was, I'm trying to find a house cleaner and I can't find one, and my place is a mess. So let's try to fix this problem.
That's awesome. And so take us through, after you had the idea, you identified the pain point, what was day one like when you launched?
So day one was, it was essentially doing research and doing a lot of, what improvements can we make to the industry. And at that time, we knew that it was a very old school industry. There was not much technology that was being used to make a lot of things that were back then inefficient and now are efficient because Homejoy exists. And so, in a marketplace or on a platform, you have, supply and demand. You need the customers who actually need the cleanings, and you need the professional cleaners that actually do the to do the actual cleanings. And so for us, that chicken and egg problem is typically very hard to solve. But we figured we could just do the house cleaning ourselves. So on day one, we just said, we are the house cleaners.
You and your brother?
Me and my brother
literally
are
going
house
around
cleaners.
House to house.
Yes. And we would just need to find customers. And so we went around finding...
Why didn't you call me on day one?
I wish I knew you existed.
Oh my God, I would have been your best.
I should have just showed up to Google.
That's right. I would have hired you on the spot, Adora, I'm telling you.
Coincidentally, we actually were starting in Mountain View, so you were actually close by.
Yeah, I take even more offense to that, the fact that you didn't contact Google.
But good thing you're a customer now.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the first day was all about, let's quickly within a weekend we just put up a website, and on the website you could just book a cleaning. It was very simple. And then we went out and tried to find actual customers to come to our website and actually book a cleaning. And it was very difficult. It took us some time. We did a lot of just running around. At the time it was summer, July, and there are a lot of fairs in Mountain View. And so we would literally run around with flyers, following people, trying to get them to book cleanings. And that wasn't initially very successful, but there was one day, it was very, very hot. There was a fair out on Castor Street, which was close by my brother's apartment, which was our office too as well. And we took water bottles. We iced a bunch of water bottles, took them out, and gave them to people because they were hot and they needed water.
Yeah.
And then we convinced them, essentially almost guilt tripped them into booking and cleaning. And that's how we got our first customers, was handing out water bottles. And yeah, so we booked those cleanings, then we went to go clean it ourselves. And what we learned almost immediately was cleaning is very hard, and we weren't good cleaners. And so at that point, we essentially decided to learn how to go clean. And we first bought books online to learn how to clean.
Really? Like what? Like House Cleaning for Dummies, or what kind of?
It's like House Cleaning by Martha Stewart.
Oh wow.
And those weren't very helpful. And so we decided, actually the best thing is probably to just join a cleaning company because they are actual professional cleaners, and learn that way. And so that's what we did. So I joined a cleaning company in San Francisco and learned how to clean. But on top of that, what I got the most out of it was I learned how a cleaning company actually works today, or before Homejoy existed, which is, there are a number of things, but just to give you a couple examples, for whatever reason, you couldn't book a cleaning online. That seems very basic today. So we solved that problem. A lot of people today, 10 years ago, booking and cleaning online might not have worked because there's a lot of, trust issues and things like that. But today, with the existence of people trusting to buy products, and it'll show up at your door, they'll buy services, and a person will actually show up at the door and do the work. And yeah, so there's, on the demand side, was we could do things better that way. But maybe more interesting was on the supply side of stuff, which is, the operations of a cleaning company. And in a cleaning company that has 14 cleaners, that's the number. I was the 14th cleaner at this company, and every single day I would show up. They'd give me a stack of papers with my customers for the day, and I would go drive out. And those stack of papers were basically where the customer was, the notes, specific notes for the job, and so on and so forth. And then I would drive, it'd be 4 or 5 clients a day. I'd drive out to all the houses, and then I'd drive back at the end of the day and give back a stack of papers. And every single day was like this. But you think of this day and age.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. Like, I could have, by the way, it took me an hour to get to work, and then another half an hour to go drive to the first place, and then all that transportation time adds up to a couple hours where I'm not even doing any work or going from job to job. But this day and age, you have a mobile phone. You can just, why can't we be in a world where as a cleaner, I wake up, I pull out my phone, I see all the job notes, I see the first job I need to go to, and just go straight there, and then just come back home, and then wake up again and do it all over again. I could have had an additional job or two for the day, essentially.
Yeah, of course.
And then, internally, there were things like the scheduler system. What I would see was this painful cadence of every day they would take 14 of us, look at all the clients, and painfully schedule in the best way for everybody to work those jobs for the day. And as an engineer, the first thing you would think is, why can't I could do this in under a second every single day without anybody sitting at a computer by just creating software for it. So these were kind of the things that it seems obvious today, but the industry was that old.
Adora, I love what you just said about trying to figure out pain points that competitors may have that you could optimize by essentially going to work for the opposition. Would you recommend that people do that to identify the pain points of other competitors within their industry if they're not going into cleaning per se?
Yes, I think yes and no. So I think in a marketplace or any business that you go into, you always need to understand who your customers are. And for us at Homejoy, we have 2 customers. We have the actual client who's getting the actual cleaning, and to get that experience is very easy because you just go to the platform and you sign up and you get the cleaning. The other end is our other customer is actually the cleaning professional themselves, and they're here to get the work opportunities and to do the work, and that's why the platform can exist. And because we're building so many tools for them, it's very important for us to understand the context of which they're working. And so it was very important for me to actually do it myself as a founder, but also it's very important for all employees, from the engineers to customer service reps who work at Homejoy, to have that context as well. And so one of the things that you must do within the first month you're at Homejoy is actually go do a cleaning yourself. And you go with other employees. And it helps, as an example, for the customer service rep, they talk to clients a lot, and so by doing the cleaning themselves, they have context to, why we book a certain number of hours, or why maybe a cleaning professional did a certain thing or used a certain solution. down to even the engineers who they're the ones actually building the tools for the cleaning professionals. And so knowing how the cleaning works and what a cleaner does helps them design things better and helps them make better decisions at the end of the day.
Do you think entrepreneurs nowadays aren't the end users of their own products, that they're just trying to put things out there that they wouldn't use themselves? It sounds like you're tying the loop with your team and everything you're doing. Do you feel like that's the case for others?
I think those kind of products tend to fail. And in fact, before Homejoy, we had spent 3 years working on those type of products, the products that we wouldn't use, but we thought other people would. And what that results in...
What were some of those ideas?
Some of those ideas. So we always went into... we became entrepreneurs because our mission has always been to make people happier. And so Homejoy's mission is to make homes happier. And so some of the other ideas kind of follow that ethos. And so the first idea was a company called Pathjoy, and it was connecting people with therapists and life coaches, because we thought, our first thought was, who makes people happy? Oh, it must be these people. And so I don't doubt that they do make people happier, but we're not the type of people who use life coaches and therapists. And so we just didn't understand the ins and outs and the intricacies to build up a good enough product for that. And so I think, for 3 years we essentially went down this route of not doing that. And Homejoy was the very first idea actually where it was a problem one of us had and where we went to go solve it.
I see. So Adora, you've done an amazing job of being in over 30 markets. And it's not exactly the type of startup where you just expand online and hope to get users. You're literally on the ground hiring and bringing in customers. How do you do that? What specific things have you thought about to distribute it to different cities?
So we knew our plan had always been to go into these 30 cities as quickly as possible. And it ended up being, it took us 6 months. And so in order to do this, you have to have you can't change up your plan from city to city. It has to be very consistent. So we basically had a playbook for demand and a playbook for the supply, how to acquire customers and how to acquire cleaning professionals. So on the demand side, what we did was, for every city we went to, we just threw a bunch of, we raised a little bit of money by this point, so we're able to do paid marketing essentially. And so we just did a bunch of paid marketing stuff, including like AdWords and things like that. But what turned out to be the kicker for almost all the markets was Groupon. And so typically for local services, Groupon is not the best use of way to acquire customers because they're typically deal seekers and things like that. But for us, we knew that if we could acquire an X number of customers in a market, and we did a very good job, we could rely on them to talk about us. And then that would help spread it virally. And so that's what we did. So for every market, we acquired through Groupon, like if it was not Groupon, it was something that was like Groupon. And there were some cities like New York City where it happened very quickly. In New York City, after the first 10 days, we maybe acquired 100 customers, and those 100 customers became 300, and so forth. And then maybe some other cities where it wasn't as dense, and it was slower to pick up. So in a couple of cities in Texas, for example, in the suburbs, it's a little bit harder. It took a couple months before it was you're acquiring users, and so there's just this linear growth path, and then all of a sudden there's this hockey stick kink, and that's the inflection point that we're always looking for. So that's what we did on the demand side of stuff, and then on the supply side, it was actually even more straightforward. We basically opened up a Google Doc and started writing down the things we did to start San Francisco. And then we handed it over to...
What was on that list?
On that list was essentially, there's a pipeline of how we bring on cleaning professionals. So you post a Craigslist ad, and then you phone screen. Then from the phone screen, they get interviewed in person. And then from there, you do a background check. And from there, you do a test claim. And from there, you get the first job. That first job is spot checked. And then
so you laid out the whole process.
Yeah, there isn't a process. If you think about it as a car assembly line, you want to try to optimize each one of those steps.
And it all started with Craigslist.
And it all started with Craigslist.
That's so funny. I think you're the third entrepreneur during this interview series who's mentioned that Craigslist has been their start in terms of getting at least a user base or a clientele, in your case, the people providing the services.
When you're trying to acquire anything, you want to look for avenues that have huge distribution already.
Yeah.
And so Groupon, for example, has huge email distribution. And Craigslist, of course, just has lots of eyeballs.
Yeah.
In our case, is job seekers, which was very good. So we wrote down all the steps of how we did San Francisco. Then we essentially gave it to another person we call a city launcher. And the city launcher's main responsibility is to land in the city, find the city manager, hire a city manager, hire the first dozen cleaning professionals in the area with that city manager, teach them all the systems that we have in place, and then they just, once everything's rolling, they just exit the city and go to the next city and do it over and over again. And the great thing was, while the framework was very much consistent from city to city, the launchers would be able to figure out things to do even more efficiently or even better. And then they would update that playbook. And then now the playbook is just really solid. So when we launched London and Berlin recently, it was pretty straightforward and resulted in us being able to actually grow even faster than we were able to grow the North American markets in the beginning.
That's a pretty sweet gig. The same person who's going to, let's say, Chicago and New York to launch Homejoy is going to Berlin and London. Like this launcher position is just somebody you send out there and bring back.
Yes. Yeah, the cadence was basically every 4 weeks they'd be in a new city. Every 4 to 6 weeks they'd be in a new city. And I thought it was, as we've talked about before, it sounds like a pretty sweet gig because you're just traveling to all these great cities and meeting new people.
That sounds awesome. And so what did it take for you to say, hey, we need a launcher, as opposed to, I feel like so many developers, entrepreneurs passively try to put their product out there and say, we're going to hope it catches on in these different cities. We're going to hope that cleaners come on our site and provide the services in different cities. Why did you decide to take a more active approach, and how do you decide on that launcher strategy?
A more active approach in...
Like in terms of, it sounds like you had an entire pipeline. Like you went after the Craigslist, you determined you were going to have interviews with all these cleaners, and it sounds like you replicated that process in every city you went to. Like how did you determine that you had to have a process instead of just trying for organic growth?
Yeah, because I was thinking in 6 or 7 months from now, I want to be in all these markets. How am I going to do this fast and in a way that's going to be organized? It turns out it's not completely organized, but in my head I was thinking through the steps. And I think it's a very logical next step to say, okay, if you want to do this really fast, and then you just have to repeat something over and over again. That's how you're going to do it. And it's idea of like just focusing on one thing and just doing it very well. Absolutely. And so that's what we did, and that's how we decided just not to change it up.
Of course.
Yeah.
And somebody who comes on to be a launcher, they also start the process at Homejoy the same way. They have to clean a house before they come on.
So launchers have to clean the most houses ever, because it's not that, when they start, they have to learn how to clean.
Yeah. So maybe it's not the sweetest gig. Maybe the traveling.
Yes. So it's a lot of great traveling, but you are cleaning a lot.
But and coming back to it, because again, I think the idea of having full understanding of your product and trying it is something you guys really hit home. It sounds like whenever somebody signs up in the early days, they sit next to the customer service reps to hear what's going on. Can you talk about that? How did you decide that was the way you should go?
Yeah, I think it's mostly a learning by doing, and what we found that is the people that spent the most time with the cleaning professionals or spent the most time just really focusing and learning on a specific thing is the ones that were more successful and the ones that were able to do more. And yeah, so when an employee starts at Homejoy, not only do they clean, but they spend a few hours with the customer service reps. They actually start taking phone calls or answering tickets. If they're not an engineer, they sit with the engineering team, and they don't watch them code. That's kind of boring. But they go through kind of how the engineers deploy things and what they're doing to design, like what are they working on in terms of designing things and stuff like that. Yeah, and I think it allows everyone understands in the company what everyone else does, and that way you trust that, that they're always working on the best thing possible. And therefore, you can just focus on your thing and not have to worry that, something else might not be going right.
Of course. So now you've built out a team, you're in over 30 markets, you're in the US and international. why don't you take us through, it sounds like on paper just a very glamorous journey, but why don't you take us through some of the battle scars? Like what were some mistakes you made? What are some things you wanted to avoid so perhaps people in the audience could avoid those pitfalls and work through them like you did?
Yeah. So I think as you growing seems glamorous, but it's actually very much hard work. And so you have to commit to, doing the cleanings and when, for example, when cleaning professionals didn't show up for jobs, employees actually went and go do them. And so it's like a commitment to that kind of hard work that, that has to happen. And I think if you don't have a company at a large company, if you don't have those type of people, then it's very hard. And so you sort of need to hire for this kind of what's the right word? Like you have to create sort of like a stereotype almost of like who is the right Homejoy employee, and then hire for that. Other things are, for us, growing very quickly meant that we had to keep the quality up, or else, in local services, like I said before, it really, at the end of the day, you can throw lots of money at acquiring customers, but that's not going to really work in the long run. If you're not doing a good job on all the cleanings, you have a leaky bucket, no one's going to come back, and then none of the paid marketing is all for naught. And so as you grow really fast, you also have to think about how am I going to scale quality as well, or how am I going to keep the quality at a certain bar and not grow faster than that. And I think some of the early mistakes that we made, or I made, was going a little bit too fast and getting ahead of the quality, and then having to kind of come backwards a little bit and fixing those things and kind of fine-tuning things and then going forth.
Awesome. So with that, I want to give you a chance to talk about any last piece of advice you have somebody who may be in your shoes 2 years ago just trying to get their product out there, and then we're going to open it up to you guys to ask questions to Adora. So.
I think actually my biggest piece of advice is, one, if you have a product, I frequently see people just hold back and not launch it. And I know that there's so many blog posts that just say launch it, launch it, launch it. But when it's your baby, it's hard to launch something when you don't think it's perfect. But you should just do it, and that's what we did. We launched something that was clearly not perfect. You just learn so much more from customer feedback than you will ever with thinking the problem through by yourself. And then second is, don't be afraid to expand. And I think there's a lot of focus these days. Yes, you should get the product you should get the product right, and you should be able to delivering great experiences, but it shouldn't have to be super perfect before you start expanding and trying to, if your dream is to be a huge multi-billion-dollar company, you're going to have to you can't just be in San Francisco, for example. You have to be everywhere. And the customer that lives in San Francisco is much different from the customer that lives in Dallas, Texas, Chicago, Illinois, these other places. And so you have to get to those people as fast as possible. And so it's always think a few steps ahead, but again, not to go too fast where you fall over.
Yeah, of course. So now we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. Yeah. Just project.
Sure. Yeah, so the question is, how did we decide on the markets? So in the US, it was pretty straightforward. It was, we collected, people would come to our site and hear about us, and then they would type in their address, and then we'd say, oops, sorry, we're not in the area yet. Please check back again. And so we were able to see demand that way from essentially collecting zip codes. In terms of international, London, Berlin, London it's obvious, it's one of, it's the biggest city, it's the biggest city out in Europe. There's 12 million people there, and it's very dense, and we felt like it would be almost exactly like New York City, which is the case, or which we found to be the case. In terms of Berlin, it's also a big city. It has 3.4 million people there, A lot of people get the technology thing, and so there wasn't that barrier or that obstacle to jump as well. And there's also, we opened up an office there, and there's a good entrepreneurial community there as well. And so it was good for hiring talent. And so all these factors combined, we decided to land in Berlin.
One.
So when you're, I'm assuming, what is your competitive advantage? The fact that they don't have to come to.
Yeah, so the question is, what's the advantage for a cleaning professional to work on Homejoy versus another company? And so I think there's two big ones. One is flexible work. So this day and age, the rising trend is for people love to just do, work whenever they want. I think most people would love to just work whenever they want. But there's an increasing trend of people working as independent contractors. And so that's the type of workers we attract, is people who, for whatever reason, we have a lot of, for example, moms on our platform that work as professional cleaners, and they can work from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock and then go pick up their kid for 3 hours, feed them dinner, and then maybe work another gig afterwards. And so you can't really find a good job that allows that slot in the middle of the day. And so that's what we allow. And then there are people who, house cleaning involves traveling around a lot. And the flexibility is also in the geographical sense. For example, some people don't like to cross bridges. Some people only want to work in a very specific area down to the streets. And we allow for that as well. And so we have been able to build up systems where every contractor, every professional cleaner on the platform tells us exactly when they want to work and exactly where they want to work, and schedule around that. So it's very complicated. You can imagine the algorithms involved in taking everybody's variations, but it's certainly possible. And then the second thing is, in which we're getting better at, in which we're very focused and passionate about, is building a community amongst the professional cleaner community, or amongst the professional cleaner base that we have on Homejoy. And so there are additional benefits to working on our platform besides just getting work. And so we try to, we're very focused on helping the professional cleaners do well and making sure, they have a good life and things like that. And we don't publicize those things too much, but it's certainly something we do in the background.
Awesome. We have a question over here.
So as you went through that process of expanding, so there must have been a lot of key management roles that you were that brought on board and introduced people to there.
Yeah.
What did you learn in the process of making some of those key roles about the profile to be successful?
Good question. So the question is, what did I learn in terms of hiring the key managerial roles as we grew over time? So there are some roles that we repeated in each market. For example, the city manager, and so we developed profiles of who the best people were in terms of launching. So for example, the city launcher, the best profile we found was actually consultants, like McKinsey consultants, because they traveled around a lot, and they were very good at just thinking on their feet and dealing with random issues, and very analytical. And we're a very data-driven company, and so that helped a lot. In terms of the city manager, these are the people that they're part of the recruiting process, and they bring on the professional cleaners, and they're the ones interviewing. And so we felt the best people for that role were the people who ran housekeeping at a huge hotel. And so in every city, we would find the top 3 hotels in the city and try to convince the director of housekeeping to leave and come join us. And we were pretty successful doing that, which was great. And it helped us, it meant that while we were learning how to, we learned how to clean ourselves, but these were the true experts in cleaning and determining who the best cleaners were. Yeah, and I think the things I learned over time is as we grew from 0 cleaners to 100 cleaning professionals to 1,000 cleaning professionals to 2,000 and so on and so forth, the operating model changed as well, and so different types of people work in different environments. So it's sort of from 0 to 100, that's sort of a typical large cleaning company, but from 100 to 1,000. You're trying to think of not how to manage each individual person. You're thinking about how do I automate some of these things so that we can manage 1,000 people at once. And as we grow even larger to tens of thousands of people, we'll have to take that into account as well.
Awesome. So with that, I just want to thank Adora for her time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
And,
thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks, guys.